Hey folks, this is Febreze. If you've ever put descriptions of pulverized and distant explosions side by side, you may have noticed their damage bonuses look the same. What if I told you that one of them is actually significantly stronger? Let's look at why. In case you haven't seen my videos before, I like to dig deep into Ravenswatch mechanics and analyze exactly how things work. Personally, there's something very satisfying about figuring out exactly where and how bonuses affect numbers in the game, particularly damage. This has led me down a few rabbit holes. One of my most recent came from asking myself, if I can sit down and manually work out damage bonuses, can I write a program that calculates everything for me based on the rules I was following? Spoiler alert, yes, but only if I'm willing to put a silly amount of time and energy into writing that program. I picked away at that problem for a couple of weeks, and it's been an enlightening process. The interface for it is as ugly as sin, but if I get it into a more aesthetic state, this might be something I share with the community so you can do your own calculations. Even if you're not interested in this calculator, however, you might be intrigued by some of the inconsistencies I start seeing as I compare my model against what we actually see in the game. Let's jump into a pretty complex example so you can see what I mean. Here's an interaction I had during a double strike dash build with Scarlet from back when I was trying to get the only human Scarlet run. In this case, I do 1902 damage on a double strike proc. To understand where this number comes from, let's isolate the variables that matter and calculate the expected damage. Since this damage comes from an attack, the first variable to add is Scarlet's base damage, which is 15. Then we have her level scaling. Since she's level 12 in this example, we'll multiply her base damage by 1.1 to the 11th. Now we need to account for conventional additive damage bonuses. The base of this will always be 1. We add another 0.9 because we have Excalibur and 9 legendary talents. For some reason, the ultimate from level 5 doesn't count towards this. We also have 4 Ace of Spades, so we add an additional 0.8 damage. That's all of our magical objects, so now let's take a look at talents. First, White Attacks adds an additional 0.35. Second, Savagery is upgraded to Legendary and we have 15 stacks, meaning we should get an additional 24 damage. I say 15 rather than 16 because the last combo point actually comes from the double strike we landed and isn't contributing to our damage. Another thing to know about Savagery is that its bonus damage isn't added to the base stat in the overlay, but is correctly buffing her damage. There's a similar thing going on with Wolfform's extra armor on defense. It's still modifying her armor and even her damage if you have Bloody Mary's Mirror. The overlay just doesn't show it. However, both these bonuses are working as intended. Now here's where things get interesting. The double strike talent claims to add 700% attack damage when it procs. We also have a global crit multiplier of 1.93, shown as 93 on our global critical damage. When we add and multiply everything together, we actually come up with 849.93 damage, nowhere near the 1902 we saw. So what's going on? It turns out the answer lies in the nature of double strike. It's a multiplicative bonus, not an additive one. Instead of being calculated in addition to other bonuses, double strike is applied on its own. If we make that change and rerun the calculation, we get the correct damage. This example highlights just how powerful multiplicative bonuses can be. Talents like double strike, fiery slash, dive, and nailing strike can make a huge difference in your damage output, especially if the ability they buff already has a few bonuses working in its favor. Now let's take a look at another example which I find even more thought-provoking. Here's a frame from my recent Wolf-only run where the special explosion procced by Explosive Rush does 2,738 damage. Let's try to break it down. Since we've done this before, I'm going to go a little quicker and try to only call out unusual parts of this calculation. One of these is Dragonhide Super Effect, which gives us extra damage equal to 40% of our armor. Of course, this damage is added to our global damage indicator, but notice that 40% of 56 is 22.4, but there's no 0.4 on our global damage. We'll need to add that 0.4 to our calculation. We also have Baylor's Eye, where we have 3 special charges, meaning 300% extra damage. We can add that as 3. Before we move on, I want you to appreciate that a single extra special charge with Baylor's Eye has a bonus effect as powerful as 5 Jack of Diamonds, which is pretty crazy, even for an additive bonus. Explosive Rush reads like a multiplicative effect, so we'll put it by itself. The rest of our talent bonus damage effects seem pretty straightforward, and we have 30% base crit chance plus Pyromania, giving us a guaranteed crit. Since we have 102 bonus crit damage, our crit multiplier is 2.02. So far the math seems to be mathing, but when we multiply it out, we only get 1,822, a far cry from 2,738. This really confused me, but the likely culprit is a talent. After a little tinkering, we find out that if we make either pulverized or distant explosions multiplicative, we get the right number. After getting that result, I did a little more experimenting, and it turns out that pulverized is multiplicative, although it describes bonus damage in almost the exact same way as distant explosions. However, if we bring double strike into the conversation, notice that both pulverized and double strike apply their bonuses based on condition, whereas distant explosions is applied universally. Could this be a way to distinguish additive bonuses from multiplicative ones? As a test, I decided to take a closer look at waterlogging and Razortail. This is a fun combination which the community's resident Melusine expert, StraightArrow, has made a tutorial and a couple gameplay videos on, which I've linked in the description. In case you aren't familiar with these talents, waterlogging buffs your attack damage whenever you wash your wisp in Melusine's special. The longer you wash it, the more damage it gets. Combined with Razortail, this can lead to very large instances of damage. Looking at Razortail, it has a similar description to Double Strike, and when I tested it, turns out fairly unsurprisingly that it's a multiplicative bonus. However, waterlogging, despite being conditional, turns out not to be multiplicative, but additive. So here's my conclusion. There are both multiplicative and additive damage bonuses for talents, and for any given talent, we can't assume it's additive or multiplicative without testing. Generally, the game seems designed to keep multiplicative modifiers from interacting, which makes sense because they could get out of hand quickly. What makes Pulverize intriguing, however, is that it can interact with another multiplicative talent in Scarlet's kit, Explosive Rush. So why is Pulverize special? While I was stewing over this, it crossed my mind that in the past, Pulverize could consume up to 3 combo points, and its explanation looks very similar to how Scarlet's power describes its relationship with combo points. I performed a couple tests to confirm my suspicions, and it turns out that the combo point buff is actually multiplicative, not additive. With that in mind, Pulverize is probably borrowing the code combo points uses to apply its buff. This discovery was honestly an epiphany for me. Scarlet's talents have had a few weird changes over time, like the nerfs to Murderous Intent, Energy, Explosive Rush, and in a more subtle way to Pulverize. Also, some of her new talents have been head scratchers, like Evisceration, whose numbers seem pretty modest. Now I get it. Pastech is cautious with Scarlet because she has all these sneaky multiplicative bonuses hidden in her kit. Honestly, I think they've been a little bit severe. Scarlet's become pretty hard to play when you start adding challenge modifiers. But this discovery really shakes up my understanding of the character, and I'll be picking Evisceration for the next little bit to see if I've been sleeping on it. So what does this mean in practice? Here are a few key takeaways. First, multiplicative bonuses can be a really big deal. Pulverize at Legendary is a 1.7 modifier on your special. For context, that's larger than the base crit damage multiplier and roughly equivalent with a damage bonus of having Strength, Vulnerable, and Marked Active at the same time. Second, additive bonuses can snowball in combination with multiplicative ones. Razortail and waterlogging are great examples of this, but even if you aren't playing Melusine, you can get a similar effect with Baylor's Eye or stacking damage with Golden Egg. Third, not all multiplicative bonuses are created equal. Contrast Double Strike and Nailing Strike. Double Strike gives Scarlet extra damage on a quick animation and locked only behind a dash cooldown, whereas Geppetto has to complete a full 3 attack animation to get value from Nailing Strike. The real power of a multiplicative bonus often depends on how reliably you can trigger it in combat. Fourth, let's keep our eyes out for multiplicative bonuses that buff other multiplicative bonuses. I'd love to be able to identify all of them currently in the game, but there are a lot of characters and talents. If you're watching this and know of an unusually punchy talent I haven't mentioned, drop it in the comments section so the rest of the community can put it on their radar. Who knows, maybe I'll cover some of them in a future video. As a concluding thought to this discussion on multiplicative bonuses, I think they add an interesting flavor to the game, and I really enjoy the depth and discovery involved in optimizing them. That said, I would prefer if they were a little more transparent for new players. Pastech has been gradually improving the game in this regard, such as editing the descriptions of abilities that grant intangibility. Something like that for multiplicative bonuses would be fantastic. But in the meanwhile, I'll try to keep cooking up videos to expose these mechanics as I find them. Hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, likes and subscribes are nice to help me do this. But that's all for now. See you next time.